I think if Professor Cooper doesn't know the answers to today's questions, then I don't know who would. We're delighted to have you with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's start with an overview, if that's okay with you. Mental health related absence, we already knew, was the most common cause of long-term sickness absence in UK workplaces. And workplace depression, stress, anxiety accounts already for 44% of work-related ill health and 54% of working days lost, according to the latest HSE report. Now, most of us are probably familiar with those figures and other similar figures, but they all relate to a pre-pandemic world. So, Professor Cooper, since then, we've had lockdown, social distancing, and the prospect of a very uncertain future. In this context, what do you predict is the impact on our mental health at work?
You mean of COVID itself?
I mean given that stress was already
it was already the leading cause of long-term sickness absence. I think it was 57% of all of it, which was interesting because musculoskeletal backache and the like dropped to 25%. Used to be the leading cause about 10 years ago. And I think we all know that COVID's had a major impact on that already. It's interesting because Boris Johnson says, well, we have to get back to work. Well, people have been working, by the way. Quite a lot of people have been working. Yeah, some people have been furloughed. And the recent studies that are coming out during the COVID period shows that the stress levels on people have been enormous because, number one, they are working longer hours because they're feeling job insecure. We're seeing presenteeism in COVID, really. We're seeing people working longer hours from home. And they can because they probably knock 2 or 3 hours off every day in terms of travel. So they're working when they're working, if they haven't been furloughed. Incidentally, even people who've been furloughed, many of them have been working indirectly, one way or another. And they've had childcare, and they've had work at night, and two-earner couples are the majority couples in the UK, and all that stress levels. And then forget about all that because they have been working harder. And the reason they've been working harder is because they want to show commitment. They want to, be present. They want to show their employer they're committed and everything else. And then we're going into a recession. So what we have is job insecurity on top of it. So basically we have all the ingredients we had in 2008 with the added ingredient, the very important added ingredient, that they have very little social eyeball-to-eyeball contact during this 5-month period. And almost all of it's been at home. So they've had fewer people doing more work, feeling more job insecure, working longer hours, trying to do homeschooling, trying to cope in a home environment with all the complications of doing business, particularly in families which are two-earner families, and that's a majority of families in the UK. So believe me, my books on stress and mental health are doing fairly well indeed, unfortunately.
So with that upsum from you, it's unlikely that stress levels are going to be going down. And I would have thought even the most random prediction would suggest that it's a problem which is going to become much worse in the next 12 months.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to come worse because, think about 2008. 2008, we had a stress epidemic. 2008 is kind of a minor event, a minor recessionary event in comparison to the one we're going into. We're talking 20% drop in GDP. That's massive. And we're going to have the job insecurity. We're going to have presenteeism writ large, people working longer hours. Well, they inevitably will anyway, because there will be a massive downsizing. Companies will get rid of staff, so we'll have fewer people. They'll be doing more work. They'll be feeling more job insecure, and they'll be working longer hours. Perfect recipe for depression, anxiety, and stress. Perfect. And it's a perfect storm. And so we have to be careful. All employers have to be really careful to recognize when people aren't coping, to ensure that they have some kind of balance. And this is going to be even more difficult because what we're going to see is employers saying, hey, people worked at home remotely, and guess what? That was fine. It worked. You know what? We can save a lot of money. Instead of having 4 floors of offices in London, let's dump 3 of them, only have 1, and that'll be for essential meetings and people coming together, or maybe younger people who need to be in an office because they need, to develop themselves and need to learn, and they're young and they're social animals and need to socialize and so on. So what we're going to have, I think, is really the added complication of trying to manage people remotely at a time when they're feeling job insecure and the like. And how do you build teams, and how do people feel connected? Although I suspect in the short term, people will try to come into a central office, not because they want to, but because they're worried. And when you're worried about your job security, you will turn up and show FaceTime. But in the medium to long term, they'll go back, and the home will be the primary source where they can. I mean, if you're a nurse or a paste assembly line worker or a truck driver, that's a different matter. You have no option but to be at the coalface.
Yeah. So there are things, there are things which people can do to improve the situation. So although it sounds like a very gloomy start, I mean, there are interventions which will make things better in the workplace. Before we go on to specific interventions, can I just ask you another general overview question? And that's about national imbalance and the worry that the economic impact of the pandemic is going to be imbalanced around the country. So mental illness and stress and anxiety therefore will be unevenly distributed. And to add to that, there'll be an imbalance because people who've already had mental health problems or are prone to them are much more likely to have those exacerbated now. And thirdly, there are some communities, as we've already seen during the outbreak of COVID-19, who've been more affected than others. So what do you think, if you were advising the government and the NHS on this, for example, and you may well be, what is or would your advice be to them about the impact of that national imbalance in terms of workplace health?
Okay. Well, I think what Andy Burnham has been saying for a long time, we should listen to. Very talented man. And he obviously is the mayor of Greater Manchester, and which is a big area. It's not just Manchester, it's a bigger area. And he's been saying that we need to localize this, and we need the mayors of the local areas and local politicians get involved in thinking through the mental health agenda for their area, because some areas are going to be hit worse than other areas, not only by the demographics, but by the businesses in those areas. Some are going to be leisure businesses like in Cornwall and Devon, and in Manchester there's going to be a lot of manufacturing and SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. So I think what we need is more localized ideas about how to look at the issue of mental health and everything, to look at how we're going to develop local economies given the nature of their structure. We're going to have to look at what mental health facilities. Luckily, we've been moving toward the integration of social care and health by region. So Manchester was the first one to become an autonomous city-state, as it were. And we have more of those now, luckily, because I think, therefore, we have the infrastructure. We're getting the infrastructure up to localize this. And that's about not only how do we develop the local economies and the local businesses, whether they're SMEs or whatever they are, or public sector workers or whatever, but also from a mental health perspective as well. Because this is going to be an issue. This is going to be a big issue. And all the psychologists and the people in the NHS, I've been working with all the hospitals in the northwest of England, and we're planning on, all of us are planning on a tsunami of problems, mental health problems. Not just, that's about mental health workers and social care workers and people like that. But it's going to hit the region too. So how do we get the infrastructure up and running to help people in the region, in the various regions that we have? This is really, really important. And I know people like Andy Burnham are really into this and thinking about developing a strategy to deal with it, because we know it's coming.
Yeah. Okay, well, we thank you for that. We're going to talk more specifically about individual issues, but before we do that, can we just do a quick poll? So you'll see it come up on the screen. Here we go. Right, so here is your poll. It should take about 30 seconds. And it'll just give us an idea of how well you think your company's already doing with mental health interventions. So there you go. There's only several possible answers. So clever, isn't it? The way it just sort of turns up immediately. I love it. This is one definite benefit of doing these things online. Okay, so there we go. We've got, well, you can see that, Professor Cooper. We've got a bit of very poor and a bit of poor, but it looks like most of those TripAdvisor ratings, doesn't it, for hotels? I always click on the very poor because I'm always dying to know what's so awful about them. Anyway, so is that what you would expect?
I think, funny enough, I think probably the response has been pretty good during the COVID period in particular. It doesn't say, do you think your company has good provision for mental health and well-being of staff? I think they're probably thinking about now, because that's been 5 months, hasn't it? And I think it's good news in a way. They say it's been fairly good. And I think a lot of organizations became very worried about people operating from home and them not being able to see them, as it were, and be able to talk to them, the water cooler effect of being able to, stop by their desk or see them in person and be able to estimate and find out from them how well they're coping. And therefore, I think people did take the message that many of us were saying to them. The message was, contact your direct report several times a week, on a one-to-one basis, not just in a team meeting, find out how they're actually coping and dealing with all the issues. So it's a good news scenario, I think, that the majority feel that their employer behaved very good or good. Is this a good representation of UK PLC? I hope it is, but remember, the people coming onto this chat are probably people interested in mental health at work, and therefore probably it skews it a bit in the positive direction. I suspect we'd get more of the poor coming in if we did a national study.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's, yes, it's probably quite likely, isn't it, that if you're on the call, you're already interested in more interested than the national average in mental health and well-being at work. So people going back to work now, what do you think are the biggest issues that both employers and people going back to work need to be thinking about?
Okay, well, obviously, there are a whole range of people who don't want to go back into a central office environment 9 to 5. They're prepared to go back occasionally because they're worried about public transport, they're worried about social care. So I think that issue, let me just get this off. I think that issue will be, what's the work environment going to be like, the central work environment? Will I have a job? What will be expected of me? If they downsize, and we anticipate most employers will that mean a lot more work on my shoulders? What will the performance indicators be? All of those kinds of things, all those issues. But job insecurity will be pretty prominent. So I think the big issue from an employer's perspective is watch what you're doing to them. Try not to overload them. Try to make sure you have one-to-ones, whether they're, in the central office environment or you're still working, they're working from home. Do the one-to-ones with all your direct reports as often as you can to find out how they're dealing with everything. And I think, give them manageable workloads, realistic deadlines, don't overburden them. Just be aware of all the issues that are going to be troubling them. And this is the difficulty I have in this arena is pre-COVID. So I run the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work. It's made up of 40 global employers from BT to BP to John Lewis Partnership, big employers, UK government, one of the permanent secretaries who's the well-being lead for the UK government's on it. It's big employers. And they said pre-COVID, the problem we have is that, so when they were looking at mental health in the workplace, they said the number one issue is we don't have enough line managers who have enough EQ and social skills. They don't have enough emotional intelligence. So we're going to have to do something about that. In other words, the concern was that we promote people based on their technical skills, not their people skills. And so the problem we had pre-COVID with mental health in the workplace is we didn't have enough line managers who were socially sensitive to people, to the fact that they weren't coping, who didn't manage them by praise and reward, but did it by fault finding, who were command and control types. And so the big issue then was, what are we going to do about this? This is a big problem from shop floor to top floor. We have a problem. We have great technically competent managers. From people skill point of view, poor. Overall poor. So, and I estimate that if we were looking at the UK managerial workforce, and this is critical, particularly when people are working more remotely, they're feeling job insecure, they're going to be working longer hours given the recession. We don't have these EQ people in managerial roles, we're in deep trouble. Pre-COVID, why it was a problem is look at our productivity per capita. We were seventh, and we were tied at the bottom of the G7 with Italy, and we were 17th in the G20 on productivity per capita. So something was going wrong with our managers. They weren't even delivering productivity. They were certainly delivering a lot of stress, but not productivity. Therefore, that was a pre-COVID issue. That becomes very large. I suspect if we're looking at any one organization, this is total estimate, this is not based on any fact, just my perception of working in industry, probably 20 to 25% of line managers from shop floor to top floor have these skills naturally. Another 40 to 45%, let's say, or maybe higher, maybe 50%, need to be trained to develop their social interpersonal skills, their EQ, emotional intelligence, particularly where we're going now. And maybe 15%, max 20, but let's say 15%, really have great technical skills, but shouldn't be managing people. They're not trainable. And really, they don't understand that. They're really good at the technical job they do, but really shouldn't be involved with people, really, because they can't be trained. And there are a lot of people who can't be trained in one thing or another. That's just life. There's nothing nasty about it, but they should be kept in a technical role and not in a people management role. Therefore, what are we going to do about training? We have to train more. We have to train them on EQ, emotional intelligence. Really, really important thing as we're entering this era where we're going to get more presenteeism, we're going to get more people suffering and more people feeling job insecure, and we need very socially skilled people in that role.
But training them, it's fine, but first you have to identify them, don't you?
Yes, you do.
How difficult is that to do? Because presumably quite a lot of people who do not have the right sort of qualities, just by the nature of it, will assume that they do have.
I agree with you. They'll think they're great managers. And I think this can be done. And the way it could be done is HR actually knows quite a lot of these people. HR will say, Fred and Janet and Peter, great social skills. They get on with their colleagues. We see very little sickness absence days. We see labor turnover is not high in their departments, etc. However, we know the problems are those 20 people. They roughly know, but you could do an audit, and we should be doing an audit. We do audits of all sorts of things. Why aren't we doing an audit of the EQ skills of our line managers and find out who has them, who doesn't have them? The instruments are there. We can do it. The psychometrics are around to do that. And then the people who've got these skills, we don't have to train. They're already good. HR would confirm, hey, we did the psychometrics. And also, we know that they're good at their job because the bottom line stats, people don't leave them. they get total commitment, and they're performers, right? And those people there could use training, right? And those people over there, the small group, let's give them a technical role, but not a people role. And that's just the way it is, and we have to find a way of rewarding a technical role, because what we do is this: we select people based on their technical performance, right? And give them very little training on people management skills. Or even when we're promoting them, do we ever actually identify that, yeah, he's great, he or she's great technically, but boy, I wouldn't want to put him anywhere near people. We never say that. We promote them. And we need to do something about that now. We have, it's an imperative now over the next few years, given that we're going to enter this massive recession. We will come out of the recession.
It's an imperative. If we do that, how much difference do you think it'll make?
I think it'll make a substantial difference on the 50%. Not everybody, but look, at training doesn't change everybody. Never has, never will. But it changes enough people to make a difference. All you need, if you have 50% of managers who are not performing well because their people skills are in deficit, and you just do half of those, you do 30% of those, and you've lifted your productivity, even if the rest of them don't get changed. But if you don't do anything, and if also you identify people who've got good technical skills and give them a different role and take them away from people because they may be damaging people in the process, you'll make a change there.
Okay, so that is one of the key things then that can be done post-pandemic to make a big difference. You've talked quite a lot about presenteeism and how you think that that will get worse over the coming months. Just tell us how, I mean, will you just, I'm sure everybody knows, but a very quick definition of presenteeism and how we can spot it, not only as an employer or a team member spotting it, but also, you know, I might be guilty of presenteeism and think I'm coming in and doing a fantastic job every day. So how would I know?
Okay, the original definition, Rosie, was when I mean, it's funny enough, it's a concept I myself developed a long time ago in the 1980s when we had a recession then. When I was called up by a journalist, and journalist said to me, it's funny, isn't it? We're in a recession and yet the sickness absence rates are going down. So I don't understand the logic of that. They should be going up. And I said, no, would you, if you were in the middle of a recession, if you were ill, would you stay at home and let it go on your HR record, or would you go into work? In other words, would you be present? Would you show? So she says, so what are you saying? I'm saying, well, I'm not, it's absenteeism is going down, but presenteeism will be going up. In other words, people wanting to show face time to protect their job. And they certainly when they're ill. So the original way we were measuring at the beginning was looking at how many times do you go to work when you're ill, right? But that's a tip of the iceberg. It's how many, it's effectively presenteeism is how often do you turn up but deliver very little added value just to show face time. So it might be that you're ill and you want to turn up because you don't want to go on your record. It could be that you're job dissatisfied, but you turn up. You know, I don't like my job, but again, I'm feeling insecure and, you know, I'm not ill. I just hate my own, please let me have leaves on the line, on the train line. Let the weather, let there be thunderstorms so I don't have to get to work. Let me give any excuse I can not to go in on a Monday morning, right? So there may be multiple reasons. It's basically people who are present but not delivering because they're unhappy, job dissatisfied, ill, could be anything. But what underpins it is an insecurity in their job and therefore wanting to show face time and commitment. So I think that is a definition. And funny enough, I mean, I have a University of Manchester spin-off company called Roberts & Cooper. We develop psychometric products on health and well-being, and we measure it. We use proper psychometrics because we're all psychologists. So we develop the psychometrics, and a subscale of it is presenteeism. And we measure it. But there are other scales too. This is now very common. It's very common now when you do a well-being audit of an organization to look at the levels of presenteeism. Employees telling you filling in items that tell them about, you know, do you turn up, if you're ill, do you turn up to work? If you're not feeling very happy at work, do you turn up to work, et cetera, et cetera. All the possible permutations, which are done psychometrically. So they're proper scales. So there's lots of scales around. Companies are now measuring it because it started, I think the measurement thing started in around the time of 2008 when we had the last recession, because the Sainsbury Center for Mental Health the economists there did a big national study and found that presenteeism was costing the UK economy at the beginning of the recession of 2008 double what absenteeism was costing. Because people were turning up to work showing FaceTime, but delivering no added value to the product or service. They're just there.
But in terms of measuring it, so we have the tools to be able to measure it.
Yes, we do.
Do you measure all your staff? Are there certain reasons why you would measure it in particular individuals, or as an?
No. I think what you do, Rosie, is you do a well-being audit of which presenteeism is only one aspect. You don't just do presenteeism. What you do is you look at people's perceptions of their boss, their perceptions of the communications in the organization, their perceptions of the hours of work, their perception, all of it. You're looking at all things that, you know, how clear is your job? How much autonomy and control do you have? Can you work flexibly or not? These are all well-being issues. These are the drivers of well-being. Because if I have a good day at work and I'm happy and I like the place I work, I have more control and autonomy than other people. My boss is socially sensitive to me and manages me by praise and reward rather than fault finding. I have good work-life balance because I'm allowed to work flexibly, right? A good well-being instrument, like, again, my University of Manchester spin-off company has, we've been doing it for years. And we can collect all the data and we can break it down by different facets. We can say, what are the factors that predict good, positive and negative well-being for women, for men, for managers, for cold-face workers, for every aspect? We can break it down demographically in minutes and then be able to say, the problem you have there is a glass ceiling for women. That's causing trouble. The problem you have there is a long hours culture. The problem there is you have a bullying line manager, right? And then that's how you identify the issues. And rather than everybody lying back, you know, on a beanbag and meditating, that doesn't solve the problem. What solves the problem is getting at what the problem is. And the only way you can do that is by doing auditing. And you know, you can do it in real time. You can do it. This is not complicated. This is not complicated stuff. And more companies are seeing well-being as a strategic issue. Thank goodness. It's now in many companies like Mace and companies like that, a board issue. It's an issue that the chief exec, senior management team do quarterly, right? And that's the change that's taken place over the last 5 years and will continue to take place after this, as we enter work again. Because if you want to retain people, this is what you have to do. And I think the big driver, by the way, the big driver is not the soft fuzzy stuff of, oh yeah, we should be in the well-being field. The big driver is we want to retain talent. How do we retain talent? We retain talent by creating the right atmosphere where people feel they can work flexibly, they have some control, they're not forced to work long hours. If they want to work from home, we allow them to, et cetera, et cetera.
Because I know you're very keen on saying it's not about ping pong tables. So I wonder if you just expand a bit on the sort of things that what you would call fuzzy around the edges well-being.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who think well-being is, a lot of people in industry think well-being is mindfulness at lunch. You know, let's have a lunch session on mindfulness. Let's have, you know, fun things to do. By the way, there's nothing wrong with fun things to do. I'm for that. But if you have a bullying management style, all the ping pong tables in the world are not going to help you. So I'm kind of worried that people think, let's do the easy, low-hanging fruit. Here's low-hanging fruit. Doing mindfulness at lunch, having mental health first aid. You know, you get employees to be mental health first aiding. I don't know if you know about that, Rosie, but anyway, that's going on. And that's an easy thing because you don't have, all you do is you train them for a day. They come back and they listen to people. I'm not saying that's wrong either. In fact,
I was about to say, these are not inherently bad things. I mean, they're good.
No, they're not. They're not.
Things, yeah.
But they don't sort out a cultural issue. Like in that part of the organization, there's a bullying management style. In that part of the organization, there's no way you can leave before 7:30 at night. In that part of the organization, you know, you have unmanageable workloads on unrealistic deadlines, right? No, those are structural things. There are issues that you have to tackle. In that part of the organization, there's a glass ceiling for women. There's no way a woman's going to move up, right? And therefore, those are substantive issues that have to be dealt with. And the other things are fun, may be good. I have a PhD student just finishing her PhD on mental health first aid because there's not many good studies. There's surveys and anecdotal, but we don't know. And companies allow anybody to do it, most companies, rather than screen people. That could be a problem with mental health first aid. So we have to find out. We need the science on that. And we need more science on mindfulness, but that's training. It's helpful. I'm not saying none of this hurts necessarily. It could hurt in mental health first aid if you get people who have real deep-rooted problems and they're trying to help other people. That could be a problem, but we don't know if it's a problem because there's no science on it. But we will get the science because everybody's doing it, and that's easy. All of those are easy things to do rather than tackle the really substantive things like line managers who just don't have EQ. You have a lot of them in your organization, you're in deep trouble.
So what you seem to be saying is if you really want a seismic shift in the things which cause the biggest problems to do with mental health at work, you need to be addressing all these management issues and you need to get the board to take it seriously at board level rather than just giving it being an element of tokenism. So how do you, if it's a board who doesn't really engage with it, what can you do to promote that engagement?
Well, I think what you can do is, I know my university spinoff company, what we do is we give them evidence. So we'll say, okay, we'll do an audit, we'll find out what the issues are, we'll do interventions, and we'll collect data on the impact of the interventions. That's how you do it. And you do bottom line issues, not like, I really enjoyed that intervention you did. No, it's not about that. It is, we did X. And these are the bottom line consequences of it in terms of productivity or turnover or less mental ill health or whatever. So you give them evidence that is the kind of evidence they're looking for. Because if you believe that a well-being culture, you know, a place I want to work, feel valued, feel trusted, will produce the goodies, then measure it. And see if it does. And when you go to boards, which we do, what we do is we give them the evidence. We go to the senior leadership team, we give them the evidence on things you're doing. And you can do that. Unfortunately, quite a lot of organizations don't do that. You know, they'll go in and they'll do something and they won't see what the impact of that something is on bottom line. But we should do. Anybody in a consulting role or working with a senior leadership team should be doing. By the way, sometimes what you do doesn't work. So fine, you don't do it. You try something different. So that didn't work. Here's the evidence. Didn't really work. But if we do that, we think it will work. So now we'll try that. And boards are, you know, it's amazing how boards in industries like construction are really, the more traditional industries are strangely enough coming to the fore. Of finance sector's good in this area because they suffered badly in 2008. Prior to 2008, the finance industry was not into health, well-being, and all that. Post 2008, boy, big time. Now it's become strategic for them. So that construction, manufacturing, they can see it. particularly engineers and, you know, applied sciences, they can see that they're into thinking about metrics. I want to measure it. I want to see if it works. Does it work? Does it affect my bottom line? Will I retain staff?
Yeah. So just focusing for a minute on specifically going back to work and some people being at home, I wanted to ask you how how companies can marry the two. So if some people are working from home pretty much for the foreseeable future, some are going back into an office, some are doing a mix. There are all these fears of missing out if you're not in the office, and the things that happen when you don't have that face time. How can companies best sort of merge the staff together so that there isn't a disconnect between those who are still at home all the time and those who are moving around a bit more?
I don't think there's going to be many people. In fact, funny enough, a book of mine, a science book I wrote called Flexible Work, I did an edited volume where I went to all the academics throughout the world, the top ones working in the flexible working arrangement arena, to look at the science. All right. Luckily, it got published the first week of May. Did not hurt the sale of the book at all. And we did, you know, you got it from China and you got it from the US and you got it from all over the world. We had academics, Australia, and the evidence was all in the kind of same direction. The direction was people want autonomy to work flexibly, but most of them not 100% from home. That's what we've been stuck in for 4.5 months. What they want is a mixed model, where they can, by the way. There's a lot of people who can't. They have to be in the office full time. Okay, so what people ideally, I think, if I was looking at the ideal person who could, and I'm not talking again about a nurse or a bus driver or whatever who has to be in a hospital or in a bus. The ideal would be I decide myself where and when I work. You give me the objective outline, what you need from me to deliver, and just give me the autonomy, control, and trust me. Trust me, and I will deliver, right? And that means working in a central office partly and working at home partly. That's probably what it means, because they have social needs at work that home provides. I'm sorry, that work provides. Working from home does not. Why it's been stressful working from home is no social contact, no eyeball to eyeball. And not really, you can't do it by Zoom. It just doesn't work. Not really, we all know. We even use the concept now, zoomed out, right? That's a concept that's now going to enter the lexicon of every dictionary from now on. Okay, so I think you can manage that system. Again, how do you manage it? People with EQ doing it in line management roles. That's the issue. We need people who can let go and give people control and can find and manage that process and is good on one-to-ones and team building in that kind of context. That's what we need. That's why we need it.
And so one of the things to do with remote working, and there is far more requirement for better communication. We've seen from the government the huge difficulties in communicating some of the core messages around COVID. And they have huge teams, they have departments doing it for them. So for companies, it is a big challenge to communicate effectively. What is your best advice on sort of best practice and worst practice?
Well, worst practice we've seen the UK government for the last 4.5 months, I'm afraid. Mixed messages all the time. I mean, they would deny it and say they had, but if they were really honest, put hand on heart. And I don't blame them in a way. It was an unusual circumstance. They didn't know what they were doing really. And the scientific advice was problematic, and it was, you know, it was a mess. But not being definitive and sending mixed messages, I think we saw nonstop, and we're still seeing today nonstop, really. So, I mean, I think you have to adhere to something. You have to be honest. You have to say, you know what we're going to do? Let's look at it from a corporate point of view. You'd say to people, look at, we're going to protect your jobs. We care about you guys and gals. By the way, they will downsize to start with. We all know that's coming. There's no way that people are not going to lose their job, I'm afraid. But hopefully let's keep that to a minimum. But then what you say is, look, we know that we have to value and trust you. We're all in this together. We have to deliver to the bottom line. It's good. It's for your survival, for all of our survivals, we need to do that. And for the country, we need to do that, right? What you choose to do, this is HR's shining light now. It's opportunity to really deliver to the bottom line by allowing people more autonomy and freedom to do it. And saying to them, let's negotiate with each person what would suit them. And if it fits in, fine, we do it. And if it doesn't, fine. You know, they have the right to request flexible working anyway by law, incidentally. And I think that's the way we do it. The message is clear. The message is you drive it. You drive it. You're the employee, you drive it. But it's a psychological contract. We're allowing you to take control and things. You owe us back. It's a contract. You know, we're prepared to do this, but deliver. You know, deliver for us. It's good for us, the country. It's good for making sure your job is safe, and for the country to do well.
Yeah. Okay, so now we just have to do all these things. We're going to go to some questions, but before we do that, can I do one more quick poll? And that, okay, so this is the poll. Here we go. And just to see how much of a priority you all think that improving mental health and well-being is. So, yeah, so some people think medium, but nobody thinks low or unimportant. So, okay, that's the start, isn't it?
I mean, I think that's healthy. But I think that, by the way, I think that's the way we've been moving for a while. You know, even pre-COVID, we were moving in that direction. You know, with the largest cost of sickness absence being long-term sickness and being stress, depression, anxiety, I'm not surprised. But it's not just about that. I think we know that if we're to retain millennials, the younger generation, we need to create the right organization that doesn't damage people. I think everybody, that's good news. And I think that is the good news. We're seeing that. And it might be a slightly biased sample, but I think if we were to go nationally, I think we'd get 6 out of 10 saying it was pretty essential now.
Yeah. So that is good news. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm going to hand over to Tim now, who will have some questions for you. So Tim, do you want to start with your first question?
Yeah, first off, thanks very much, Cary. That was fascinating. Well done, Rosie. Excellent administering of the questions there. There's been quite a few comments going around about EQ. So perhaps to start off with, Cary, could you just, in a few words, just explain to everybody how you would sum up EQ? And then what would you suggest? You've talked a lot about developing that within managers. How would you suggest that happens? Is there anything specifically as a short term that people could do in the immediacy to improve the EQ of their management population?
Okay, for me, EQ is several components to it. One is your social sensitivity. Are you aware of people's feelings? Are you sensitive to them? And that's important. So that's your social sensitivity, your awareness of people's behavior, both verbal and nonverbal, and what it tells you about their feelings and at that moment and emotions at that point in time. Okay, that some people would call empathy, right? And empathy is really, really important in managing people. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is seeking social support when you need it. So you've got EQ, an EQ person says, I'm not coping very well. In other words, self-awareness is another aspect. So being empathetic to other people, but also having self-awareness and knowing when you are not coping, and then being able to pick the right kind of strategy to deal with the problem you've got. And that means seeking social support if you need it, rather than just withdrawing and keeping it buried. And there's training. You can train people on EQ. Let's say you can train the majority of people on it. And some people are more difficult to train because they have a certain personality that makes it very difficult. You know, it would be hard for them to accept. And these would be the people who say, yeah, I'm really great with people. I'm fantastic with people. And everybody who works for them knows they're lousy with people. That is a totally, whereas most people would probably say, I think I'm good with people, but I don't know, and I wonder what people think of me. And if 360-degree appraisal actually worked, it doesn't work, because people never give feedback to their boss really about how what their behavior is like. Maybe we could have gained some progress on that, but we haven't.
Great, thank you. You talked earlier about the importance of everybody being aware of mental well-being and educating everybody. A couple of comments have come back saying, what about if people, you touched on it a little bit there, don't want to learn, particularly in the management population? I can guess, what you might say to that, but what would be your suggested action within an organisation if you've got people that are just ignoring the opportunity to learn more about it so that they don't then apply it in their roles?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not exactly quite sure how you deal with that. I mean, if they're not prepared to learn about themselves and how they affect other people, particularly in a managerial role, really, they shouldn't be in a managerial role, frankly. They're the 15% I was talking about. They don't really care. Look, I'm really great at marketing. I just want to do the marketing. I don't care about anything. You're not going to teach me anything. Me learning about myself is not going to help me at all. I'm a marketing manager. I expect them to deliver. I'm a sales manager. Main thing is we got to get pounds in the till. I mean, yeah, that would tell you a lot if they were unprepared to learn. Because guess what? It's all about continuous learning, isn't it? If you're really good at your job, you have to change, because technology is changing all the time. And if you're not prepared to learn, then you're not prepared to deal with the changes that technology provides.
Yeah, no, thank you. Going back to the way we're operating at the moment with, predominantly on Zoom and Skype and what have you, and you've talked about the mix going forwards. Good question, I thought, has come through saying, well, should we take a little bit more risk at the moment and see our people a little bit more often, given the impact that Zoom calls are having on people? What would you say to that?
When you say see him more often, does that person mean like in a central office environment, you mean?
I assume so, yes. But yes.
Yeah, well, first of all, they ought to do it virtually anyway, one-to-one. I was saying that during the lockdown. I was saying, please, several times a week, go one-to-one with your direct reports, even if it's on Zoom, all right, or some technology. But now you can go in an office environment, and somebody can come in. If substantially people are working from home, if you think somebody might be problematic with one of your direct reports, go out for lunch or go into an office, go into the office environment and meet them. To go in occasionally, I think it's really important. I think people need that. The mixed model is going to be the model that's going to work. It's going to be you work substantially from home, if you can, by the way, because there are people who can't. I have to keep saying that because there's quite a lot of people who can't. But go into an office from time to time, and they're going to want to. They're going to want to have meetings. They're going to want to talk about, Manchester City Football Club. They're going to want to talk about whatever they're going to want to. That's what human beings are about. We're programmed for social connectedness. Sure. Yeah. And so I think that really is important, particularly if you, as a line manager, think, I'm worried about Fred. I don't know why. I've just got the sense when we've had our meetings, there's something wrong. And I've tried to do one-to-ones, but that hasn't worked. And I'm going to try to find an excuse to bring Fred in. Yeah. And then we can talk.
Yeah, good. Do you have any tips in terms of Zoom meetings to be able to pick up any nuances and any body language? Is there anything around that at the minute?
You can pick up some stuff, can't you? People may be less, less talkative than they normally would be. I mean, your staff, right? And you should be able to say, Cary's very quiet now. It's not like him. I wonder what's going on. And then you go one-to-one with that. You can, it's difficult though. I really do think it's difficult. And not only that, you tend to find out about things when you leave a meeting, right? You walk out and you say, Fred, is everything okay? Because I noticed you were very quiet, And that might not be the boss saying that. It might be somebody else saying that to you. So, we miss a lot not being eyeball to eyeball. Everybody thinks this is a great panacea. But if we were to ask a question, if you were to do a question and say, would you like to work 100% from home? I don't think of all the people you have on this webinar, I think you get one saying yes, 100% from home, because we're social animals. So that's the issue.
Yeah. Taking the work perhaps that your company does in terms of well-being auditing, a couple of people have asked, is there, in terms of measurement, what are the metrics? Is there a template to which we can use to measure well-being? What are the key factors?
Okay, what are the character? What we did is we developed our own, because we're a University of Manchester spin-off company. So, you know, and we're all psychologists. So we have to have proper psychometrics. And we published something called Asset. And that's what we use. And we've upgraded it to put in presenteeism and other things. What it effectively measures is you as a person. First of all, we want to find out what your mental health is about. So we have a scale on mental health. We have a scale on physical health, psychosomatic physical health, and one on job satisfaction. So those are outcome measures. Okay. But the input measures, which are very important, are how you perceive everything about your workplace, how you perceive your line manager, how you perceive your ability to control and have autonomy at work, how you perceive your hours of work, how you perceive the clarity of your job, the role you play. Is your role ambiguous? Is it clear? Do you have good work-life balance? Are you allowed to work flexibly or not? Because a lot of organizations, for example, on flexibility, they'll have the flexible options, but everybody's scared to take them. Because, particularly men, because the evidence is men would like to work more flexibly, but don't tend to take them because they think in management think that they are not as committed, right? So you have all of that, and then you can break all, and then you do the demographics. So you go into a company, and you then get everybody's demographics, age, sex, all that, where they work, the level they're at, every demographic you could think of. And then you break all the data down so you can say, for young people who've been here within 5 years, that's their profile of how they perceive the organization. They have little control, little opportunities for development. They're not managed by praise and reward, but by fault finding. So that's, say, the millennials or something. And then you can break it for the older workers. You can break it by that department versus that department. You can break it every which way. You could also do it by saying, okay, what are the parts of the business where there's high labor turnover? How do they compare with ones with low? How do they compare with ones with high absenteeism versus low? How do they compare with ones with high presenteeism versus low? And then you can look at the profiles of those departments. And you do it anonymously so people can give their truthful answer. Oh, the psychometric is powerful. It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's been published and there's data on about 200,000 people now.
Often the elephant in the room, and a point that's been made by a few people, is that the problem lies with the leadership team right at the top, and getting them to accept there's a problem there. Have you experienced where that's happened positively, where senior people, the chief executive, we've had comments about chief executives being sociopaths, and there's a well-known book on that topic as well. Could you give us some examples of where that's worked well and an organisation has acknowledged the highest level?
Okay. Well, it's very interesting that there's a company that my university works with, a really good company in the construction industry. I don't know if you know this. A couple of years ago, when they were looking at the data on accident rates in construction industry in the UK, I think it was roughly, I'm giving you rough figures here because I don't have them in front of me, but roughly about 45 people or 50 people died on a building site from an accident. But 450 people that year, 450 construction workers committed suicide, right? So the industry had a big session at I think it was the Institute of what was it? Anyway, the Institute, one of the construction institutes had a civil engineers, that's at the Institute of Civil Engineers, had a meeting at which I presented. But I was listening to data presented by the industry itself. Well, I saw 10 times as many people committed suicide in the industry than actually had died of an accident. Huh? So mental health was the big issue. So this company Mace said, this is an interesting one, let's discuss it. And that was a chief exec in his team. Very good. Very good. And they believe in doing something about it, and working with the supply chain as well. So that's the kind of thing you have, and they do it at very senior levels. There are a lot of companies like that now. More and more companies are getting it. If you look at John Lewis Partnership, they're doing some really good things.
But I think if your boss, as Tim was saying, is on the more sociopathic scale, how can you? I know what you said earlier, give them the evidence, but are there any other tips to make a difference at that very top of the leadership if they've not engaged with it, and you're sitting there thinking, well, I know this person or this team, how on earth am I going to make any edgeway here?
No, but the way you make the edgeway, I think, well, there may be some people who are just very resistant to this, by the way, so you're not going to change them. That's reality. That's the reality of life itself. The majority of people at that level love Matrix. I'm afraid Matrix tells them, you say, here's the data on your sector, construction. Here's the data on you. Here's the data in the finance sector. Here's the data on you. You have an issue. Your labor turnover, the sector is 20%. Your labor turnover is 42%. You're not retaining people. There's a problem here. So what are you going to do about it? You say that to a senior, to a chief exec, and most of them are metric driven. They will be. But you're always going to get some who are resistant because they don't, this psychological stuff, this soft, fuzzy well-being and stress stuff. No. They have to get on with it. You're always going to get that, Rosie. There's nothing you can do about that. You're banging your head against a brick wall. But organizations that do that will find themselves in trouble because they won't retain talent. With that kind of an attitude, they won't retain talent. And that's the big driver. It's not just productivity. It's not even just reducing sickness absence, particularly stress-related and mental health sickness. It's also about retaining talent. As one HR director told me, I said, and he was in the finance sector, this is many years ago during the 2008 thing. I said, you guys did nothing prior to 2008 in the whole area of stress, well-being, mental health, and why are you doing it now? And he said, regrettable turnover. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, we downsized so much. Remember, the sector lost 30% of their staff, maybe more, because of the 2008 bank crash. And he said, because we have to retain the people we've got. Everybody now matters because we're mean and lean. So talent retention, regrettable turnover. We cannot afford to lose key people. Driver, big driver.
I'm afraid to say that we're out of time, but Sir Cary Cooper, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And on behalf of TeamDoctor, thanks everybody who has joined in and participated today. I hope you found the session interesting and enjoyable and thought-provoking. I can't believe that you haven't. I think it's been absolutely fantastic. We will be emailing a link out of the recording, so if you've missed anything, feel free to pass it on to any of your colleagues or anyone in your network that you feel may be useful. I'm really sorry that we haven't been able to cover all of the questions, but I hope that you found the ones that we have covered have been interesting, and I'm sure you appreciate Sir Cary's answered in that respect, which have been very candid. So thanks again for that. Email will follow in the next day or so with the link, and if you are interested in any further information from TeamDoctor, that's our final plug, do please contact us. Thank you all very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you very much.